The Big Ten is loaded at quarterback. You've got a sixth-year senior at Oregon who takes over the second best offense in America, a fifth-year senior at Washington who threw for over 12,000 yards in the SEC, and Ohio State's new starter won a Big 12 championship at Kansas State. But wait, there's more. The most decorated QB coach in America joins the conference with a new leader who just wrecked Louisville's top 20 defense for almost 400 yards, and 3 of the top 5 QBs in this class are headed to Indiana, Nebraska, and Ohio State. With at least 12 new starting QBs in the conference, I decided it was time to figure out who's the best and, more importantly, get to know who the favorite to win the job is at each school. So today, I'm ranking the top 10 QBs in the Big Ten. We'll talk about why the other 8 failed to make the cut, and I'll check out FanDuel's odds for who has the best chance to win the Heisman. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because now that we've got new teams to talk about, I've got a lot more content to make. And if you think a Big Ten QB will win the Heisman, hit the like button and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
He's hit and sacked. He's taking a shot downfield, wide open end zone, caught, touchdown.
Whether you love the new schools that joined or you think they're in for a rude awakening, there is no doubt that a conference that finished with 6 of the worst 15 offenses in America just got a lot better by adding 3 teams who finished inside the top 12. And before you say Washington doesn't count because DeBoer's gone, remember that Jed Fish had Arizona inside the top 20 and he put up 38 on OU in their bowl win. But all that only means so much. At least 5 of those atrocious Big Ten offenses have a new QB, and the 3 big-time programs from the Pac-12 break in a new starter too. And even though we know there's potential, we still got plenty of questions. So, like any other bored college football fan in February, I went to FanDuel to see what they thought of the Big Ten QBs and what odds they gave each one to win the Heisman. Dillon Gabriel's 3rd nationally with plus 1,000 odds. Will Howard's at 4 with plus 1,200. Drew Aller's plus 4,000. Will Rogers and Miller Moss are both at plus 5,000. Alex Orji at Michigan is plus 6,500. Dante Moore, who's Gabriel's backup, is at plus 7,500. And Nebraska's savior, Dylan Raiola, came in at plus 10,000. Now, just because these are the top 8 QBs in the Big Ten with a chance to win the Heisman doesn't mean that these are the best QBs in the conference. So let's break down who is. But before we get to the top 10, let's talk about the 8 guys who didn't make the cut. Maryland's transfer MJ Morris has played in 9 ACC games, but he regressed from his freshman season when he only threw 1 interception on 86 attempts. And he went 3-1 as the starter at NC State, but he only completed 55% of his passes. So how much of those wins were on him versus the team around him? Rutgers is working with either Gavin Wimsatt or Ethan Kaliak-Manis, but the fact that neither of those two were the clear-cut starter tells you everything you need to know. Assuming Wimsatt does win the job, we're talking about a QB with a 14-17 TD to interception ratio and a completion percentage close to 45%. Cade McNamara returns to Iowa, but it's not about him. It's about the offense. He might be a decent quarterback, but Ferentz will never let him play. He's just a handoff checkdown specialist who only threw for 500 yards in the 5 games he did play last year before he got hurt. Hudson Card might be the best Big Ten QB not to make this list, but he threw 8 interceptions in 5 of their losses, so he's got to improve in big moments. Max Brosmer at Minnesota is an exciting story, but moving from FCS New Hampshire to the Big Ten's a big jump, so he's a wait and see with serious potential after he threw for over 6,000 yards over the last 2 seasons. Luke Altmaier actually had decent numbers in his first year at Illinois, but a 13-10 TD to interception ratio doesn't cut it, and the backup looked better than he did at times. Alex Orji's another exciting story, but he hasn't thrown a single pass at Michigan, and I won't be surprised if they add another QB from the portal after spring ball once that next window opens. But I think his best case is that he's like a KJ Jefferson from Arkansas when he was at his peak, and worst case, he's probably a poor man's JJ McCarthy. And last is Brendan Sullivan, who started multiple games at Northwestern, but looked a lot more like a game manager. His experience helps him, but he's got a ways to go before he's considered a top 10 QB. Now, just because those guys don't make my top 10 doesn't mean they don't have the potential to work their way in. I just think the guys who are at the top of my list are game changers instead of game managers. So let's start with number 10, and that's Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin. The definition of a guy who needed a fresh start. Go back to 2021 when he took over as the starter and he ended up with almost 3,000 yards, 25 TDs to only 6 interceptions, and Miami thought they were set at QB till he bolted for the NFL. But then his OC left for a head coaching job. He had to learn under 3 different coordinators in 4 seasons, and the slow-paced, run-heavy scheme never really fit his skill set. This last year, he lost the job after he couldn't fix the turnover issue, and heading up to Wisconsin, where they let him throw it more from shotgun, should help him to be more of a playmaker, and I think it'll boost his NFL stock. But even with Miami's coaching carousel, he ended up with 7,500 yards passing, 56 TDs, and he completed 64% of his passes. So he's an instant upgrade for Luke Fickell and fully focused on developing into a draft pick. Number 9 is Ethan Garbers, who honestly should have been UCLA's number 1 QB all year. In their bowl game against Boise, he came off the bench in the third quarter to go 9 of 12 for 152 yards and 2 TDs, which was enough to help him come back to win that game. And after he finished with 11 TDs to only 3 interceptions, it was obvious that Chip Kelly should have played with his most consistent passer instead of forcing his true freshman into tough situations every week. He was 4-2 as the starter with wins over USC, Stanford, and Colorado, but now that he'll get a bulk of the work at QB in spring and won't compete with 2 other guys for the job, Garbers is in a great position to take a step forward, even if Chip Kelly does leave for the NFL and a new OC steps in to guide him. My number 8 is Indiana's Curtis Rourke, who transferred in from Ohio, where he started 33 games, earned first team All-MAC, threw for over 7,500 yards, and went for 61 total TDs and only 16 interceptions. Indiana's new head coach might be in for a rough year 1 since he's building a team from scratch, but getting a QB in who's been all conference back-to-back years and has 5 years of experience is a massive weight off his shoulders. Rourke's 6'5", 230, so he's built to play in the Big Ten, and even though he's had some accuracy issues, he's got great arm strength, and he can run the read option to keep the defense guessing where the play's going to go. At 7, I'm going with Dylan Raiola, and this is not biased. I am just a big believer in his opportunity to succeed early with an O-line that returns a ton of experience and 4 multi-year starters. You've got a receiving core that adds 2 guys who've gone for over 1,000 yards each in their careers, and an offense that'll be designed to suit his skill set. I think back to Adrian Martinez's true freshman season, and he finished as one of the best QBs in the country, and it's hard to imagine that Dylan, one of the most prized recruits in the entire class, won't make that same type of impact. He spent years training with one of the best quarterback coaches in the game. He's played against some of the best talent in the country already, and there isn't a QB in the entire class who's more prepared to start day 1 than Raiola. My number 6 is Aiden Childs at Michigan State, who followed Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, where he backed up DJU and looked great in the 9 games he played. He went 24 of 35 for 309 yards and 4 TDs, but a lot of his work came in big moments, not just mop-up duty or when the game was already over. Oregon State was ranked in the top 25 for most of the year, and even though he's now playing in an offense that struggled a lot last season, the schedule MSU plays is really similar in terms of talent, so he'll benefit since he got to play a lot in the Pac-12 last season. On3 ranked him as the 6th best QB in the portal, right behind Will Howard and Dillon Gabriel. So if you trust the experts, then you should expect MSU to have pretty solid dual threat QB play for at least the next 2 years. Now we get to the top 5. These are all guys who've been in college for at least 2 years and have shown that they're NFL draft picks next year, or at least have the potential to be if they have a good enough run this season. At number 5, I've got Drew Aller from Penn State, and part of the reason he's so low is because of the situation he was in. The receivers weren't very good, the offense was extremely average, and even though his numbers were decent and he wasn't throwing picks, he severely underperformed based on his expectations. Against Ohio State, Ole Miss, and Michigan, which were the only good teams that Penn State had to play last year, Aller completed less than 50% of his passes, and the offense only averaged 17 points a game. Franklin knows he can't waste this talent, so he brought in Julian Fleming to help at receiver, the OC from Kansas to help develop a passing game, and hopefully Aller can finally compete when they play a top 25 defense. At number 4, I've got Will Howard, who walks into an amazing situation at Ohio State. The Kansas State offense has similar elements of what Ryan Day likes to run, so the transition won't be too hard for him to make, and even though there are multiple 5-star QB recruits in the room behind him, none of those guys have enough experience to get taken seriously out the gate. The running back room's the best in the country. The receiving core features multiple NFL level targets. And if Howard was able to complete 60% of his passes with Kansas State receivers, imagine how much better he'll look next year. Sometimes being a great quarterback doesn't mean you have to be an elite passer. It just means managing an offense and leading a team on long drives that result in points. And Howard's been an expert at that for 2 seasons now. At number 3, I've got Miller Moss in his first year as the starter at USC. And a lot of guys would have left knowing they had to sit behind Caleb Williams for 2 years. But Moss opted to stay and work with Lincoln Riley. And from what we've seen so far, that's paid off. He's only thrown 92 passes, but he's completed almost 72% of his throws for 900 yards, 9 TDs, and only 1 interception. He's not the mobile QB Lincoln Riley's used to, but he's great in the pocket and has the arm talent to make up for whatever he can't do with his legs. Lincoln Riley's never not had a Heisman caliber QB, and this year, that'll be no different. At number 2, I have Will Rogers at Washington, and it's impossible to say he doesn't deserve it. He spent 4 years playing at a middle-of-the-pack SEC school, but he still threw for over 12,000 yards, 94 touchdowns, and he completed 70% of his passes across 43 games. I have no idea how much different the offense will be for him and what the transition into the Big Ten is going to look like for the entire offense, but a QB who's thrown almost 2,000 passes is in a great position to lead an offense that'll be extremely inexperienced at receiver and on the O-line. And at the top of my list, I've got Dillon Gabriel at Oregon. He's been second team All-AAC twice, first team All-Big 12 once, and now he'll be a preseason first team All-Big 10 QB. Gabriel's already started 50 games in college, and he's thrown for, or been on pace to throw for, over 3,000 yards all 5 seasons he's played so far. This year, he would have been a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, but a year in Oregon with an elite offense around him could easily vault him into the 1st round, and his ability to pick up yards on the ground only makes him more dangerous and harder to contain for any team they play. It's kind of weird that literally only one of these QBs that made my top 10 played in the Big Ten last year, but now that the conference has so many new styles offensively and the Big Ten's so much more diverse than what it was before, it's refreshing to see some of these proven guys come in after they had success at other schools, because it just makes the games we get to watch way more entertaining. And our sponsor for today's show is the Character Chronicles on YouTube, where you'll find tons of Nebraska breakdowns, interviews, and shows on sports I don't cover like basketball, volleyball, and I bet if the baseball team ends up doing well, Adam will have some things to say about them too. They've been a great partner to help us get content up all season long, so if you haven't yet, you can click the link in my description box below or type in Character Chronicles in the search box above to get subscribed to their channel. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Is Dylan Raiola a top 10 QB out the gate, or do you think he's behind some of the other Big Ten guys who've had a season or 2 to gain experience? Does Will Howard make sense at number 4, or do you think he deserves more respect with all the talent he has at his disposal? And which one of these QBs ends up as a Heisman finalist? I think it's hard to pick against Gabriel at this point, but Miller Moss has to be one to watch since he's got the best Heisman coach in the country. But that's all I've got for today, so until next time, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.